Hello everyone. In this video, me and my groupmates will illustrate a study based on the theme Personal Security versus State Security. We focus on the Sri Lanka Civil War as our case study, and it is important to acknowledge that we are covering the course learning outcome number 2, which is discuss the basic philosophy of conflicts, security, and national defense. The real question from this case is, what did really happen in Sri Lanka Civil War? In the late 20th century, the island nation of Sri Lanka tore itself apart in a brutal civil war. At the most basic level, the conflict arose from the ethnic tension between Sinhalese and Tamil citizens, which in this war they are called as Liberation Tigers of Tamil Illam. In other words, LTTE.
The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Illam, LTTE, were a militant separatist group fighting for an independent homeland for Hindu Tamils in northeastern Sri Lanka. The LTTE was founded in the early 1970s by Velu Pillai Prabhakarai, who led the group until his death by Sri Lankan Armed Force in May 2009. During the 1980s, the LTTE defeated a number of different Tamil militant groups, emerging as the dominant group by the end of the decade. The LTTE successfully carried out a number of high-profile attacks, including the assassination of 2 heads of state. The LTTE were also notorious for their use of suicide terrorism, perpetrated by their elite suicide bombing unit known as the Black Tigers. Starting in 1985, the LTTE began negotiation with the Sri Lankan government. However, multiple rounds of negotiation failed and were interrupted by bouts of violence and clashes between both sides.
Once you look at the poster, you can see there's an old Sri Lankan lady with a face full of fear, and on her there's a mild illustration of people fighting. Other than that, on top of it, there are flags of Sri Lankan state and LTTE. The whole poster depicts the fear of poor civilians who lost their security and everything as a consequences of the war between the two parties, which is Sri Lanka and LTTE. The civilians have to be the victim of blurred future by the smoke of the explosion from the weapon used. Moreover, the quotes at the below, which is terrorism and war is a festering wound, says everything about the situation of the war, which is a terrible plus aching situation for both state and the civilian.
Realism remains as a powerful theoretical framework in international relations, including the war on terrorism. Hans Morgenthau, a classical realist, defined international politics as a struggle for power, which was essential for state survival, national security, and in some cases, for world hegemony. The fact that the quest for power is the main motivation of states and they seek power for their own survival as well as to protect themselves from others seem to be explaining the civil war in Sri Lanka so well. From the perspective of realism, terrorism might be justified in the struggle against a political power that is viewed as a threat to one's way of life. The LTTE group, by spreading terror, is using the limited means at its disposal to counterbalance the Sinhalese influence in Sri Lanka. The damage of a full military offensive is evidently not a concern for the group's commanders for 2 main reasons, which both of it may serve to enhance their power. First, it will contribute to fuel sentiments throughout the Sri Lanka as local populations become the target of aggression. Secondly, the feeling of injustice by these attacks creates an opportunity for the spontaneous recruitment of fighters who would be willing to die to validate the group's aims. Personal security in general means deterring crimes or violent acts on a person, whether from the state or external state, from violent individuals or sub-state actors. So, in this context, the personal security of the people of Sri Lanka was terribly affected by the sub-state actor, the LTTE itself. A lot of civilians were chosen as a victim by the LTTE group to be used in their brutal suicide attacks, particularly women as well as children to be recruited as soldiers, which beats the definition of personal security. In terms of national security, terrorism is a huge threat of the country because it has successfully disrupted the political stability of Sri Lanka. The implications of terrorism have mostly been negative, notably in the loss of lives and properties, population displacement, unemployment, underdevelopment, so on and so forth, all of which culminate in national insecurity.